All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome in. The sun is shining bright in Columbia, South Carolina, and maybe throughout the Palmetto State. Welcome in. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark, of course. Y'all know what we're here for. South Carolina 17-14 victory over Clemson. A game that, as we suspected, could potentially give us some historic moments, and it certainly delivered with South Carolina, of course, scoring late in the game on offense and then getting a big turnover on defense. And just, Chris, I don't even know where you want to start, man, but I would say in some ways this just felt like what this team has done all year long for a good portion of this football game. I know a lot of you out there watching right now are probably watching the game, whether you were at home, whether you were in the stadium, and you were maybe just wondering, is this going to be our day? It just doesn't quite feel like it's going to be South Carolina's day. And, of course, defense keeps hanging in there. And then ultimately, I can't go any further. We're at the 1 minute mark. I just have to say the name LaNorris Sellers, contractually obligated at this point.
Yeah.
Just be like, LaNorris Sellers, LaNorris Sellers, LaNorris Sellers. Ultimately, in a team game, he was the ultimate difference maker, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, how about, Wes, the last two games that South Carolina's played against a Power 4 opponent, you get a score with, basically a 1 minute drill. I mean, the Clemson game, you got the ball, obviously, with a lot more than a minute or even 2 minutes on the clock. But you look back at Missouri, you have the ball with about a minute, you go down and score in thrilling fashion, you win the game. This one, you go down, you win the game because you're backed up with a, 3rd and 16, right? And LaNorris Sellers makes another Superman play. Carolina leads for the first time in the game with about a minute 8 on the clock. And he was the difference in the game, Wes. He was, I think, the main factor in Carolina winning this game because it was his legs, his decision-making, his Superman ability to, get out of the pocket and run for a couple touchdowns that ended up being the difference. But there's a lot of other credit actually to go around too, including South Carolina's defense, I think including special teams. And we'll get to all that. But, man, we have, I think, got to start with LaNorris. That's what everybody's talking about. Gamecock fans, certainly Clemson fans, are talking about LaNorris Sellers. And, Wes, I keep going back to this comment I heard over the weekend. I had a longtime Gamecock fan who's been a part of the program or close to the program for years, who said, I've never seen a player improve as much from game 1 to game 12 as LaNorris Sellers in 1 year. And, thinking about it, I think I agree. Now, here's the interesting thing. LaNorris Sellers was pretty talented and pretty good game 1, right? But remember the early season conversations about maybe not jitters, that's a bad word for a guy like Sellers, but just some of the freshman mistakes, field vision, turnovers, just not looking like a freshman, frankly, in the first few games, and now where he is. It has been a meteoric rise. I feel like he's cut down on the negative plays, but he's making even more of the special plays that we all knew he was capable of making. So, I mean, what a performance, man. It was superhuman at times what LaNorris Sellers did on Saturday.
Well, before our very eyes, we were watching LaNorris go national, I think, as well. Like, we already, I mean, so let me hit on that first point first. To me, some of what we've seen from Norris as the year has kind of gone on, I think is just us seeing, like, who he is. I mean, there's definitely improvement. I mean, he even admitted it. I chalk a good bit of game 1 up to just, hey, there are some nerves here. Like, I almost wondered, Chris, was that the first time LaNorris had ever been nervous? Like, like you just see how even keel he is, and the just ability to to go into these situations where a lot of quarterbacks, whether they would admit it or not, in these late game situations, would have some nerves. He really doesn't seem to have that anymore. But I think going back to game one, it was just a little disjointed for the entire offense because this was these guys' first time being on the field in a real game together. And it felt like it. I think all the guys, not everybody, but a good portion of the offense was just a little bit off. And, you look at that, and so I think there was probably going to be some pretty quick improvement once Sellers just settled in. And I think a lot of it, man, is just confidence, comfort level. There have been improvements in the passing game. I believe two things. I think he's a better natural thrower of the football than most people actually give him credit for because we get so caught up in the runs. But I also think in terms of like managing kind of the passing game, improving as a guy who can just sit back and pick you apart, there is still a tremendous amount of upside here to go. And it's going to be fun to kind of watch that. But what we're seeing right now, I mean, the crazy thing about a lot of his runs against Clemson is, yes, they were impressive, but I am already almost numb to what he does.
Yeah.
Like it's almost expected. I've watched, of course, all the clips have popped up on social media in the last, 24, going on 48 hours. And I don't know which run was more impressive. Like I know which run had the biggest impact because it won the game, but there were several runs you could pick where you're like, how many tackles did he break on this run? And, I think this is especially, I would say going back to that like Texas A&M game, we've seen flashes of it all year long, but it's kind of just been on a different level here down the stretch. And just, I think it's kind of one of those things where maybe even he realized like, hey, even at this level, I can't be tackled at times. And, the early escape on what should have been a sack and has become, it's basically his patented move now where guys go high on him and he just kind of ducks them off of him. And next thing you know, he's loose and 30 yards down the field. Like we're becoming used to seeing this. Like these are not flukes. This is really who he is.
Yeah, that I was just thinking about that. His ability to go low. And Wes, this is a guy that just has incredible strength. He can squat. What's the squat number? 650, 600, something like that. For a guy his height is just incredible. He just has strength that is uncommon for somebody his size, and something that I've seen a lot talking to a couple folks that cover Clemson, Wes. Both have mentioned to me independently the acceleration of LaNorris Sellers once he gets in the open field. He has a very dangerous combination of being able to break out of the pocket, right? Not when just one guy has him hemmed in, literally has hands on him. When multiple guys have hands on him, he can get out. He has great acceleration. He makes defenders who are linebackers, defensive backs, look like they're stuck in the mud. And then he has incredible field vision. That first touchdown, Wes, that he scored, I thought he would just keep going north and south. He starts going west. And I'm sitting there watching immediately live going, where's he going? He's going to the pylon. And he found it, And then the second touchdown drive, Barrett Carter for Clemson, who's an NFL player, really good player, he starts having to anticipate LaNorris Sellers' cut, a similar cut. LaNorris sees it, just cuts it upfield, scores a touchdown, right? So, the two touchdown runs were obviously incredible, especially the last one, given the circumstances, the situation. But he had several that were just extremely impressive. Clemson actually had 3 sacks, Wes. Dabo Swinney said after the game, we probably should have had about 6 and maybe more, if we're being honest, Wes. Just a crazy performance. And I'm glad you mentioned the passing too. That's been a line that I've seen from people, whether it's not really in the South Carolina bubble, but Clemson or regional, national, well, if he could throw, he can throw. He can throw very well. We saw some of that in the game. Obviously, the run game was bigger for South Carolina, but LaNorris Sellers can throw the football, whether it's thrown with zip. Remember the ball he put out there to Jared Brown with a guy in his face for a first down. The touch pass to Delvon Campbell that was almost a touchdown was an absolute drop in the bucket. The guy's a very talented player, and he's not just a one-trick pony. So just a crazy performance to watch. Wes, Shane Beamer after the game, not shy. LaNorris Sellers is the best player in the country, is what he said. And if you watched on Saturday, you could not laugh at that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, he went national. He will have Heisman hype going into next year, I think. Like, you can lock that in. And, a position now for South Carolina where you have a home state talent who is at the most forward-facing position probably in sports, kind of leading your program going into next year. Not that we want to get quite ahead of ourselves to that point yet, but just exciting stuff there all the way around. And Chris, I brought this up after probably A&M or Missouri, but I still maintain, as even kill as that guy is, he goes to a different place when he is challenged, when his team is challenged. We've seen it in 2-minute drills really all year long, certainly the end of the Missouri game. I mean, the end of this game, those final couple of drives, like, yeah, he had the pick, but the field goal drive, then, of course, the touchdown drive, the last 3 drives of the game for South Carolina's offense, to me, they looked as good and as settled as they had the entire game. I think a lot of that goes to 16. He goes to a different place when he is challenged. And even how many times, y'all, have we seen Carolina give up points and then on the very next drive, it feels like that's when the offense answers? And I think there's something there as well to where, okay, well, all right, when it's time to lock in, this guy just takes his play, his demeanor to a completely different level. And you saw, yeah, he is even killed, but you saw some of that passion on Saturday as well. Like, this dude is a competitor. Don't let the unassuming personality, the fact that he is, not a big, huge rah-rah guy. There is a competitive nature, a competitive fire there with this kid. And this team, I think, feeds off of it. And so there was no surprise to me when 16 ran into the end zone and you kind of had that zoomed out shot on TV. That really just wasn't a surprise. It was kind of like, as they were driving down the field in that final drive, I'm just thinking, you're going to win or lose this thing with 16. Like, nobody else. If he throws a pick, if he makes a mistake, so be it. 16 deserves to have the ball in his hands with the game on the line. And we saw it play out just like that. Special, man. Just special. We talked about Friday's show. Who would have the better quarterback? Would that be the difference? And to give credit, man, Klubnik, like we also talked about, their passing game, far better than it was last year. Like, he came to play. He made some great throws. Good game plan from Clemson. Let's maybe kind of get into a few of those details, Chris. Clemson was entirely built their entire game plan around, do not let those edge guys wreck this game. I think they literally wrote that on a board in Sharpie and said, anything that doesn't go back to that point, throw it out.
Yep.
Every single thing they did on offense was built around, do not let those edges wreck us. Even those pass plays they hit down the field, kind of vertical, in the first half, Chris, it felt like they still got the ball out pretty quick. Like, I know Shane Beamer said after the game, I didn't feel like we got enough pressure on the quarterback. That was true, but I kind of feel like once he goes back, and I'm sure he has by now, once he watches the film of it, it's like, man, they're just getting the ball out so quick. That was their entire game plan, I think.
Yeah, I think that was a surprise in the game for me, but watching it back, there's some context, and I think it makes sense as to why South Carolina had just one sack on the day, which actually came from Bam Martin-Scott, a linebacker, right? You know, if you just look at the box score, maybe you're just watching the game live, you're sitting there going, oh, you know, the offensive line for Clemson held up really well. And actually it did. I think that here are kind of the factors for me. Number one, Clemson did get back their guys on the offensive line. Tristan Lee, their starting left tackle, Marcus Tate at left guard came in, and he was kind of on a pitch count. He played some in the game, but that allowed them to move Blake Miller, who had been playing left tackle, back to right. And then they stayed healthy during the game. So they got their guys back, and they did play pretty well. But that was very noticeable, Wes, how Cade Klubnik's taking the snap, and a lot of times he's not even dropping back. He's not back there surveying the field. It's quick drop. You got to read, get the ball out. Like you said, even on the downfield throws, that's one-on-one man coverage. You know you're going to get a lot of that from South Carolina. That's, hey, do I have man? Okay, throw the football up, right? And early on, I mean, Carolina did give up some plays, whether it was short passes or the long ball. They gave up a few plays of, 40, 36 yards. They gave up a few longer passes. They weren't scores, fortunately, which is what you had to avoid. But Clemson did make some plays on one-on-one balls. If they didn't make those, this is probably a different game, right? But I think Clemson, they did, for the time they did have to protect, they did a pretty nice job. The plan was to get the ball out quick. And I also think, Wes, that, and this is going to sound weird because Cade Klubnik did scramble and break out of the pocket for their only 2 touchdowns of the day, but they did, you could tell schematically, South Carolina was very tuned into the fact of, let's not play quite as chaotic as we normally do. Normally, South Carolina's wrecking shop in the backfield, lots of blitzes, lots of guys just pinning their ears back, rushing the passer. You could tell there was a more strategic effort to keep Klubnik in the pocket. Now, a couple times that didn't work down in the red zone when things got more condensed, right? But it sounds kind of weird. Rushing the passer, I think, was not quite as much of a priority for the Gamecocks coming into the game. And I think that continued with the way Clemson's playing. If they're getting the ball out in 1.5, 2 seconds, immediately getting it out, you're not going to send a blitz every time. You're not going to devote a bunch of resources to rushing the passer. You're going to make them beat you through the air. I do think, Wes, one of my concerns going into this game was man coverage. I felt like South Carolina had given up. You look at the A&M game, look at Missouri, even look at Wofford, some quick hitting passes. We saw that from Clemson, and they hit a couple downfield balls. But, man, the thing that sticks out about this defense is when they needed stops, when they really needed them, they came up with them. Carolina, a few turnovers in this game. No points surrendered by the Gamecock defense after those turnovers, and that was another huge difference in the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially on that final drive, man, as Clemson got closer and closer to the end zone before the pick, they were definitely cognizant of, all right, this guy has beat us with his legs, and he beat Pitt in a very similar situation. End of game, he gets out of the pocket, takes off running. You've just seen LaNorris do it to them. The last thing you wanted was for Cade to be able to answer and do the exact same thing to you and win the game. So I think certainly some game plan aspect of that. Now, I know Carolina didn't want them to go right down the field as quickly as they did in that final drive, but ultimately that set up D-Knight for a very special moment there for him, a guy who has just been the complete embodiment of what you want from a South Carolina student athlete. Couldn't be happier for D-Knight. Chris, I was down there at the ops building when the team got back, shooting some video, doing the stream for Gamecock Central. And one of the guys off the bus with, I would say, the most energy down there. There were several, but the guy holding the trophy, the guy who still just looked like he was on the football field, was D-Knight. Like, smile from ear to ear, fired up. Great moment for him, obviously, and something that he is going to remember for his entire life. And but man, so no matter how much you scheme something up, sometimes players just go make plays. And I thought I was a little bit, as much as we knew the Clemson receivers have improved, I was a little bit surprised that they did hit several of those deep balls in the first half, because it really felt like South Carolina was in good position defensively. Like, it wasn't like you're just beat. It was just good throw, good catch. I didn't know if that was sustainable for Clemson in the second half. It really didn't prove to be entirely sustainable. Sometimes in those one-on-one situations, you're just going to get beat. And that was what happened. And that really helps Clemson to move the ball in the first half. And, Clemson's going to look at it, and the LaNorris Sellers touchdown run, they have a spy on 16.
Yeah. Didn't matter.
Like, they have the call on that was supposed, I think they only rushed 3, and they spied. They're in man, but they spied and basically said, we're not letting him beat us. They probably should have spied 2 guys, honestly, looking back, and just kind of bracketed him on both sides. I will say, I think the guy they had spying him misplayed it a little bit, because he pressed up into the line of scrimmage, and it allowed, I think it was Kamar Bell, it allowed a Carolina offensive lineman to get their hand on him. But even then, pressing up on the line of scrimmage, you're giving LaNorris all the room he needs, and then he forces a missed tackle. Then once he's off and running, he's just not going to be denied. So, and I bring that back up, even though we've kind of moved on from LaNorris. Sometimes, like, you can have the right calls on. Sometimes it's just, this guy just made a play. And that's something Beamer talked about in his coaches show thing that they do on Sunday. He was like, we told our guys at halftime, look, Clemson's guys have made some plays on you. Like, they've made some individual plays that have, let them have some success. In the second half, our best players have to go make some plays as well. And that was kind of the story. I felt like the running game for both teams, it was kind of similar results, honestly, because, and I take out the QB run. When I think of just run game, schematics, stuff like that, I'm more talking about your down to down, traditional, maybe you put in your design QB run in there as well. But I think you kind of throw out scramble yardage in that. Down to down, it felt to me, Chris, like both sides were just kind of grinding out some interior success. Like, they're staying ahead of the chains, but there wasn't really a ton of explosiveness in the traditional running game either. Like, you look, I think Rocket and Maffa both averaged 3.3 yards a carry. Like, I think right on the dot.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like neither side was getting stoned, but neither side was just going up and down the field in between the tackles either. So that to me created a ton of these just third and makeable for both sides. But then you're going, all right, can you make another one? Can you convert another one? Like, you were having to do it over and over and over again on both sides.
Yeah, I thought Rocket gave Carolina some tough interior runs. I thought Oscar Attaway came in when Rocket was not in the game, and probably, Wes, I don't know if it was statistically his best performance, but I thought it was his best performance of the year because of what it meant, right? When Rocket's not on the field, Rocket had to go out at one point looked like he hurt his ankle, Wes, tape that thing up, get back out there, right? But even before that point in the game, Oscar was out there. I think he only had, 6 carries, but he had an explosive run for South Carolina. He did some really good things for them. And I think they did just enough in the run game to keep Clemson honest. There were a couple earlier in the game, negative yardage kind of perimeter plays. South Carolina had more success up the middle with the running backs and did just enough to where you're right. Third makeables, which South Carolina was able to pass on some of those downs or were able to run. with LaNorris Sellers' ability to scramble being, a big part of that. I also thought, Wes, in the second half, there was a point in the fourth quarter where Dowell Loggins started dialing up, quarterback power, pin and pull with getting LaNorris Sellers on the perimeter. That was very successful as well once South Carolina went to that. So inside run for the backs, perimeter run for the Gamecocks, and for LaNorris Sellers. One of my other keys, it was kind of funny, Wes. I had like 5 keys to the game, and South Carolina was kind of meh in several of them and still won the game. One of them was an explosive run game, and that didn't come necessarily from South Carolina's running backs. It came from LaNorris Sellers, with a lot of them being on plays that weren't designed, but obviously his legs, being able to sit back and call a run, or being able to call passing plays where, if we don't have anything, 16 can take off, that he did. And so being able to run the ball very effectively was huge. Yeah, Klubnik got a couple touchdowns, but Carolina was able to control, I would say, Clemson's run game. You didn't give up anything huge to Maffa, and I think that was a big key in the game as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. And really, I think, I'm trying to pull up the play-by-play to make sure I'm remembering this right. The final, South Carolina. So before the final Clemson drive, which of course ended on the interception, when you really needed stops, right? So after the Norris interception, what happens? 3 and out. So the defense gets the ball right back to its offense. And then on the ensuing drive, after the field goal, after the surprise onside kick that didn't hit, what happens? Another 3 and out. And among those, you have a Maffa run for 1 yard and a Maffa run for 4 yards. So when they really needed it, there was one play in there. I think it was the 1 yard run by Maffa on the final stop before Carolina got their game-winning touchdown drive. TJ Sanders, I'm pretty sure, was doubled, and he got smashed backwards on the initial contact and just used his hands, moved them out of the way, got back to the line of scrimmage, and made just a grown man play to get a stop there. So you do, like you said earlier, man, like, yes, LaNorris, he was Superman. He was the guy. He won the game for you. But there are these little things that can go unnoticed throughout the game that ultimately, kind of, I would say, reiterate that it is a team game. Somebody mentioned on here earlier, how about Boogie chasing down a Clemson receiver? I mean, we're way down the field at this point.
He's over there backpedaling,
hustling his tail off and giving time for, his teammates to get down there and help make a play. So just little plays along the way, especially, I mean, this was a game in the margins, man. Like, there were so many third downs. Both sides were kind of, to me, it felt like for much of the game, both sides were kind of filling each other out. Neither side wanted to make the big mistake, even though there were some mistakes. Both sides were kind of just taking a little bit of a dink and dunk approach offensively. And, you were just wondering, all right, who's going to make the big play? Who's going to make the bad play? If you told me coming in, Chris, that Carolina would have 3 turnovers on offense, I would have honestly said, well, that's the one way they lose this game.
That's right. Yeah.
Now it did kind of even out, actually, because you have, of course, the Clemson fumble, you have the D-Knight pick, and you have a 4th and 1 stop, which is not technically in the books as a turnover, but is pretty much the same. It's a turnover on downs. How good is South Carolina at stopping 4th and shorts, dude?
They have something. And, Wes, talking about kind of that's not really a hidden play that was huge in the game, because, you stop a 4th and short when the opponent has a chance to kick the field goal and take points. That's huge. You're going from an almost guaranteed 3 points and maybe 7 to none, and now you have the ball back, right? So that was a huge play in the game, but I think, Jalen Kilgore and D Knight were credited with the stop, which they made, but dude, Brian Thomas Jr. made that play. I mean, Clemson's got Carolina outnumbered on that left side. They bring in Peyton Page and Peter Woods, 2 defensive tackles in a jumbo package. Brian Thomas Jr. just fires off the snap, swim move. He blows it up. Jalen Kilgore beat his block, and that opened things up for Kilgore and D Knight to come in and make that stop. So that was, a huge play in the game, right? And there's a bunch of those I think you can pick out on either side. I've seen a lot of Clemson people saying, well, if we did this, it would have been different. South Carolina could say the same thing. If Nick Harbor is able to hold on to that ball with one arm, basically one hand, that's a touchdown, right? Nick, you're not going to beat Nick Harbor in the open field like that. Cade Klubnik missed a big throw on 3rd down that would have been at least a first down, maybe a lot more than that. Carolina missed, obviously, some opportunities in the game. So a lot of big plays that were made or some big plays that weren't made in the game. Wes, people are talking about kicker here. Alex Herrera. I know I'm getting this probably off script a little bit, but I got to mention this. First of all, Kai Kroger, he did Kai Kroger things, 5 punts, 3 down inside the 20. Only 1 returnable punt for Antonio Williams, who can be a dangerous punt returner. He got 1 yard because of the hang time. So A+ in that category.
Hey, Chris, real quick before you hit all that, I want to mention the 4th and 1 stop came after one of those punts that was down inside the 5. So Clemson drove the ball 85 yards on that drive.
Yep.
And got no points. Now they did answer. They ended up scoring the next drive that they had the ball, but you shifted the field position again and made them have to drive the field again as opposed to scoring there. And to me, like that's kind of a demoralizing thing. If you want to look back at what ifs, you had probably your best drive of the entire day, one of them, in terms of just consistently executing, and then you were not able to score because Carolina, when this defense, I think they love and are very, very good, Chris, at playing aggressively. And has that hurt them a couple of times this year? Of course it has. That's the nature of the beast. But when it's 4th and 1, I think that's when they are able to literally they're like, all right, your goal, if you give up a touchdown on 4th and 1, so be it. Go out there, be super aggressive, get a stop. And we've seen them time and time. Like, this is not a fluke at this point. We've seen them time and time again get those stops on 4th down. And they can be game-changing because they really are the same as a turnover. But continue on special teams.
Yes, and I knew I was going to get us off script, so sorry. But yeah, Kroger was great. The coverage was very good for South Carolina. Defense came up huge time and time again, not only in that 4th down situation, but, after the turnovers, right? You turn the ball over 3 times. Normally you lose the game. Clemson also had an extra possession on the onside kick that Carolina nearly got, right? And, they didn't come away with points on those turnovers. Alex Herrera, he needs some credit for hitting that kick. That's not a kick to win the game. It's not a kick to tie the game, but the margin ended up being 3 points, Wes. And that was a pressure-packed kick. It's getting late in the game. You just drove. You didn't get what you wanted, which was a touchdown, but you needed points. And Herrera comes in. That's not a chip shot. I know people like to say 50 yards and under or something should be a chip shot in college. It's not, even in 2024. Big kick. And look, we knew coming into this year, and we've seen throughout this year, Carolina doesn't have Elliott Fry, Parker White, Mitch Jeter back there. We knew that. Knew it'd be a little bit more of a question mark. I don't pin, Alex Herrera 51-yarder against Bama doesn't make it. I don't think you can hammer a kicker too much for that. The LSU game, I understand, right? But look, he's taken a little bit too much. Some of the criticism has been a little bit unfair. Wes, how many, you and I both know, how many times have we heard from Gamecock fans, he can't make a 40-yarder? If you go actually look at the numbers, Herrera's 7 for 10 from 40 to 49, right? He's 0 for 1. He's only tried one 50-yarder against Bama, didn't make that. So I know people are maybe being a little bit using some hyperbole when they say that. I'm not saying Herrera's been incredible this year, but that was a huge kick in the game. And I think some of the rhetoric around him has gotten a little bit out of control. So huge kudos to him for making that kick. Again, 3 points ends up being the margin here. That was a kick you really, really needed, and you got it, and it was in a pressure-packed situation.
Yeah, and Chris, I also want to say our guy is 7 of 8 from 39 yards and in as well. So he's been incredibly consistent on the shorter stuff. It's just, I think when you start to get, like any kicker, every kicker has their range. And when you start to get closer and closer to that range, the accuracy is going to dip a little bit. But he's now 14 for 19 on the season, 73.7%. That's not terrible, man, by any means. So kudos to him. That was into, I think, their student section area as well. Key moment in the game. And really, Chris, just the vibe of if you went from, all right, it's a 4th and 4, you're going for it. Then you have a just very weird delay of game where I still am not quite sure what happened. It seemed like it seemed like people were upset. Like Norris was talking to the ref. Like, was the clock supposed to reset or something? I still don't know the story on that. But
it seemed like he was saying his comms were out.
And that's
like pointing to his head. Like, I don't know though. Yeah.
So point being, the vibes on if you went from, all right, 4th and 4, we're going for it, we're going to tie the game. All right, weird delay game, then missed field goal, and now that stadium is going nuts.
Yep. Huge situation.
It was a calming. It was like, all right, now you kind of did you want to tie the game on that drive? Of course. But I've always felt like there's a little vibe shift. It was kind of, to me, the opposite when Missouri cut the game to 6 against South Carolina. And all of a sudden, everybody in that stadium knows you're one mistake away from losing the game. Like, a touchdown can beat you. And there's just a little change. So then, and I know Beamer is aggressive. He wanted to go for it on the 4th down before you got knocked back. But it's kind of funny how the delay of game, it actually ended up exactly the way it needed to end up for Carolina to win the game, because it changes. Even if you tie it up there, it completely changes the way everybody plays out the rest of the game. So who knows what happens if Carolina, even if they get their way and convert the 4th and 4, who knows what that ends up looking like. And it just played out the way it had to play out for South Carolina. And Chris, I don't even know if South Carolina as a team, I know they played incredibly hard. I don't even know if you look back and say they had played incredibly well overall. But I think my takeaway is just the heart and the determination, the ability of this group to never, like, it's something all coaches say, but they truly, when they have faced with adversity this year, like this team more than maybe about any we've seen at Carolina, they do not panic. And they keep making plays. They keep finding a way. And and I mean this as a compliment, that may be Shane Beamer's absolute best quality as a coach. We have seen from a big picture, like a season standpoint, when Carolina has had adversity in a season, people start quitting on the team, like outsiders start quitting on the team. I mean, they kind of just keep pulling in the right direction. And, even finishing 5-7 last year, look around the college football world. There are teams that when they were 2-6, it would have just ran off the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, if they would have finished 2-9 last year, or if they had won 3 games last year, they aren't able to go get the guys in the portal that they went out and got.
That's right.
They kept it on the tracks just enough. Then you build towards the future and you get guys to help you this year. Well, the game for much of Saturday, how many South Carolina games have we seen against Clemson where it's just like, man, Clemson, you hear Gamecock fans talk about the horseshoe, right? Clemson's got a horseshoe. They find a way, right? Yep. This felt different. Carolina found a way. And that's what you can say about this team this year. I think they were forged through the fire of losing some of those games close early on. And it's a huge credit to Beamer. It's a huge credit really to the entire staff, man. And those players too. I don't want to lose sight of that. There's a lot, regardless of what happens on Tuesday when this latest college football playoff iteration comes out. There's a lot for the staff. There's a lot for Carolina fans and for this team to be very, very proud of.
Yeah, they never fold up, right? And that's been a hallmark of Beamer teams. It's funny. I might have referenced this on the show in the past, Wes, but one of our members on the Insiders Forum on Gamecock Central, this was a few games ago, he posted a thread after one of the big wins and was like, in the future, can we maybe just let the season play out before we – and, it's funny, right? Because the answer is no, that's not going to happen. There are going to be people who – Wes, there are people after the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, probably into the fourth quarter of this game that were yelling, Game 1, the vibes, even though it was a win, were not great. That you look back at some of the past seasons where the vibes have not been great after a loss or after a string of losses. And Shane Beamer keeps his guys engaged. There's an example probably of every single year where there's some point in the season where Beamer will sit down with the players. He referenced this after the game, sitting down with the guys, seniors after the Oklahoma game, and saying, what's on your mind? And they said, win out. And then they talked about, okay, great, cool idea. How do we get there? And this team has surprised people in some form or fashion every single year, right? You mentioned last year, 2-6, very easy to go. They're going to finish 2-9. They're going to finish, or 2-10, whatever it may be. They're going to finish 3-9. And they didn't. A couple years ago, Florida game, fire everybody, everything's bad, team won't win another game, 63-38 against Tennessee, 31-30 against Clemson. Now look at this year, 3-3, some disappointments, many different ways that the team had been disappointed, and now here they are with 6 straight wins, maybe the hottest team in the country with maybe the hottest player in the country as well. So I agree with you. That is his best attribute. Being able to lead this team and have this team never give up. And man, there was a lot of adversity in this game. It was kind of like much different game than 2022 in Clemson, but there was adversity, getting down, having to deal with different adversity, different negative plays throughout the game. And South Carolina didn't flinch. They just stayed in the fight and came out on top again.
Yeah, man. I will say we've said this all year long. Enjoy this, guys. Enjoy it.
Yep.
I was thinking about this too, Chris. Be honest. How many people out there during that Clemson stretch, even though you knew hey, streaks and dynasties and stuff like that, it's never forever. college football, sports in general, they're all cyclical, right? But how many times did you look out there and say, man, Clemson is so far ahead of South Carolina. Is this ever going to end?
Yeah.
And now you're sitting there. South Carolina's won 2 of 3. That erases any, because on the recruiting trail, you use anything to your advantage, right? If South Carolina would have lost on Saturday, whether true or not, 2 years ago, that's just a blip on the radar. That's one, then you start doing the math. That's one win in, what would have been one win in 10 years, basically. Like you can present the math however you want. You can present the numbers however you want. Now, you're South Carolina, you're going, well, Beamer took over a team that lost 6 in a row to Clemson. I think that's right, before he got here, and is now 2-2 as a head coach against Clemson. Now, if you're South Carolina, you're going, we've won 2 of the last 3 against Clemson, and we beat them twice in their ballpark, like in their stadium. And, so to me, that just changes the vibe. Now you have Carolina, who for all those years sat there and watched Clemson make the college football playoff, watched them, even if they didn't make it, compete for it every year. And you weren't even sniffing the conversation. And now you're going into college football playoff, second to last show, and they're going to be talking about, have you done enough to get in?
Yep.
I mean, that's just night and day different than where things were when Shane Beamer took over.
Yeah, I mean, Carolina wasn't just losing, Wes, in this rivalry. They were losing badly. I mean, Steve Spurrier's last game to Clemson it wasn't Steve Spurrier's last game. He was gone by that point mid-season, so Sean Elliott was the coach. But that was 37-32, right? After that, it got rough, right? It's 56-7, 34-10, 56-35, 38-3. Shane Beamer's first year, 30-0. I mean, just an ugly game to watch, an ugly experience for South Carolina fans. And then the catharsis of that breakthrough in 2022, right? And now you've gone up to Clemson twice in a row now and won that game and won it in a come-from-behind fashion. It's pretty awesome, right? And so the worm has turned, it seems like, right? I mean, Carolina, there'll be a game next year in Columbia, and we'll see what happens. But there is a different feel to this rivalry, and that you can't sit there and say Clemson's still in control. A Clemson fan may bring up the all-time record or whatever, but there are cycles to this thing. Carolina only has a 1-game win streak in this rivalry now, but they have won, as you said, 2 of the last 3, and there's just a different feel, and this thing just feels much more competitive than it did really just a few years ago. So a lot of credit to Shane Beamer, credit to his staff, obviously credit to the players and the fans. I mean, yeah, y'all have got to enjoy this no matter what happens from here on out.
The worm has turned. Isn't that a Mike Bobo?
He did say it. I wasn't going to associate that, Wes, because some people may not like that, but it is an applicable phrase.
Yes.
To what has happened here.
For sure. All right, y'all. Hey, let me tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time app, gametime.co. Whether it's sports, whether it is shows, whether it is music, that's the app we use here on GC Live if we're looking for tickets. And you can do the same. Again, download the app by just typing in Game Time on your app store, or you can go online, gametime.co. Let's see what we got coming up in Columbia right now here, Chris. Of course, football season in terms of in Columbia over. We'll see where South Carolina's headed here soon, whether it's CFP, whether it's bowl game. But, dude, Trans-Siberian Orchestra coming to CLA for Christmas shows on the 12th, 13th. 2 of them on the 13th, actually. Actually, I'm lying to you. 12th in Columbia, 13th in Greenville. So depending on where you are in the state of South Carolina, a opportunity for you to go see that. All you got to do is click through. Here's what I do. Like I always tell y'all, hit GT picks at the top, then hit all-in pricing as well. So you're going to not have any of those fees added on at the very end. You're going to know exactly how much you're paying, where you're sitting, and you're going to know what the view from your seats is as well. Again, Game Time, like we always tell you as well, use the code OWN3. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And Chris, also, I want to tell everybody, and before we get out of here, I want to talk a little CFP, but also we got a sale going on Gamecock Central, $1 for 7 days. And I'm here to tell y'all, the data says y'all act like you don't like the transfer portal, but you love the transfer portal. Transfer portal officially opening next Monday, but you're already going to have guys making announcements that they're going in, kind of trickling in during this week as well. Grad transfers can already enter, or graduates can already enter as well at this point. So come on over to Gamecock Central if you are not a subscriber already. $1 for 7 days so that you can get a little bit of a feel for what we got going on. And hopefully you're going to want to stick around. Of course, we've got continued coverage from the Clemson game. We have National Signing Day on Wednesday, which frankly feels like it's a little lost in the shuffle with everything else going on, but that's still going on Wednesday, the push towards National Signing Day. And then, of course, college football playoff discussion and complete transfer portal coverage as well in terms of guys. I expect South Carolina, there's been a couple questions on here already. The Gamecocks will once again be incredibly active in going out and adding talent in the transfer portal. Lots of positions on defense where they're going to need to go out, not only build some depth, but get a couple of impact guys, I believe. Maybe you add another receiver. Maybe you add a couple of offensive linemen. South Carolina will definitely be active, and that'll be something we'll have you covered for right here on GC Live and, of course, on GamecockCentral.com as well. Chris, has South Carolina done enough, or are they going to be right on the outside looking in?
Man, you're just really putting me on the spot. They're on the line. I'm gonna give you a gut feel, Wes. I'll just give a gut feel. A gut feel is that Carolina's going to get barely left out. It's my gut feel. I'm not saying I agree with that. I might change it in an hour. Might change it as soon as we end this stream. It's my gut feel. Now let's actually analyze the thing a little bit. By the way, we've seen Shane Beamer made a case after the game when asked. Kalen DeBoer and Lane Kiffin have been going on Twitter and making their cases. Lane Kiffin has very much, by the way, taken aim at South Carolina because of their head-to-head win very strongly. If you dive into each of those cases, there are a lot of things at play here. The biggest question, Wes, is how many spots are left, and we don't know that until the conference title game's finished next week. Right?
Yeah, I mean, technically, but dude, I don't. Other than the ACC game,
right? But that matters. That matters for the spots.
Yeah,
Clemson could steal a spot, is what I'm saying. If Clemson wins, they're in automatically, and then the committee could take SMU. You know, they could.
But if that's how many spots are there left anyway.
Yeah, there's not a lot of spots anyway, but
there's basically one. There's one spot.
So let's say that the spots are what they are at this point before Tuesday, right? We're gonna have a better idea, obviously, on Tuesday night, because one of the things that's going to happen is they're going to pop up 3 teams in the rankings, at least 3, and I'm just going to stick with the SEC teams that have the same record. 9-3 Ole Miss, 9-3 Bama, 9-3 South Carolina. So that's the comparison a lot of people are making. And yesterday I published a piece on Gamecock Central that outlined the resume, South Carolina versus Bama. Tried to look at both sides. Later today, I got South Carolina versus Ole Miss. And there are arguments for both. Bama and Ole Miss both have a head-to-head over the Gamecocks, but using the selection committee's criteria, South Carolina is ahead in other metrics on both those teams. So it's just kind of a what does the committee weigh, how heavily? And Wes, I think you and I agree on this point. The human element, to be quite frank, screwed South Carolina against LSU. The human element being the officials in that game. Now, this college football playoff selection committee is not going to come out and say, we think the officials host South Carolina. That's not going to happen. But could they talk about LaNorris Sellers being injured in that game? Maybe. Will they weigh the official thing in the back of their mind? Maybe. It's very ironic to me that the human element screwed South Carolina in that game to where they're not already in the college football playoff right now. It'll be the human element that if they make it in, will save them, because it's going to take the committee going, this is maybe the hottest team in the country. Their final regular season win was more impressive than what Bama or Ole Miss put forth. They've won 6 games in a row. They have an elite quarterback. And a lot of the other metrics are in their favor. We're putting the Gamecocks above Alabama and Ole Miss. And we'll see on Tuesday if that happens, but I think there's a chance. So we'll see.
And do they say they just beat the team we told y'all was number 12?
Yes.
On their home field?
Yes.
In our rankings. They
seems
just
like that should count for something.
You would think, man. Is there any chance that the committee went with chalk, so to speak, like the sort of just, all right, here's our easy answer. Carolina lost to Alabama and Ole Miss head-to-head, but they're about to play Clemson.
Yep.
Is there any chance they said, look, we're putting Clemson ahead of that entire group because they have 2 losses going into last week, and we're going to wait and see. We're going to put off the reaction to this move 1 week, because if Clemson beats Carolina, we don't even have to deal with it. They're out.
Yep.
Is there any chance they internally said whoever wins that game is going to be the front of this pack?
Could be. And obviously Carolina needs to get above 12. That's the other thing.
That still doesn't get you in.
That doesn't get you in. You can sit there and say they should jump Bama and Ole Miss. Cool. If you jump Bama and Ole Miss, you're at 13. That's where Bama was last time.
You're at 12.
But if you replace Bama, 13, 14, 15.
But you're going ahead of Clemson.
Yeah, well,
you're at 12.
Right, you would be 12 at that point.
You're 12, but you're not in.
Yeah, before Clemson plays in the title game. Yeah, so 12's still not in. That's a good point.
Yes. Yeah. You're 12, but you're not in.
I was kind of just taking Clemson even out of the equation. So, yeah, you got to do a little bit better than that.
Here's the short answer. You have to jump Alabama and Ole Miss, and you have to hope the ACC only gets 1 team.
Yes.
So
which is why next week matters to me still.
But it is whoever they say is better. Let's say it's South Carolina. Let's say it's Alabama. Let's say it's Ole Miss. It's whoever they put in the top of that group on Tuesday night ahead of Miami.
Yeah, that's a key question. Miami has 2 losses. They play in the ACC. Their 2 losses are to unranked teams, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think they have 0 ranked wins.
I have my answer. I'm not on the committee. So Miami plays in, Wes. Next weekend with the ACC plays into it. But we will know more. If tomorrow night the rankings come out and it's Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, you're not getting in, right? If South Carolina is ahead of those 2 teams, you might get in. And
I think you
go ahead.
I think you have to be in on Tuesday to get in.
You gotta be in to be. You got to be in right then to stay in.
Yeah.
to go into the psychology of the committee a little bit, that's probably the wrong word, to go into maybe the decision-making process, I do agree with you that they left the door open in several ways for Carolina. Clemson's at 12. Hey, opportunity for South Carolina to go win this game against Clemson, right? You look at some of the other comments throughout the year. You look at LSU and South Carolina. Remember, both of those teams at one point had 3 losses. LSU had the head-to-head win, but LSU was behind the Gamecocks. They were asked why. Ward Manuel, the chair of the selection committee, said they've gone in opposite directions, right? So since South Carolina played Ole Miss and since South Carolina played Alabama, South Carolina has the superior record to both those teams. They have more impressive wins. Their last week win was over number 12 Clemson on the road, whereas Ole Miss kind of struggled at home with Mississippi State. They won by double digits. Alabama had a home game against an unranked poor Auburn team and won. But will the committee say, hey, the only reason last time that we ranked, and he actually came out and said this, Alabama and Ole Miss were very close. Alabama's a little bit better. Alabama and Ole Miss are ahead of South Carolina because of the head-to-head. Adding everything up, we now have an entire regular season. Will they take not just the final week, but the entire body of work? That's another phrase they've used, body of work. Will that trump those head-to-head losses to Alabama and Ole Miss? I think it could. There's a chance. So we'll see.
Ohio State, completely safe, right?
They are, but it's a bad loss, man. But their other loss is to number 1 Oregon.
Indiana, right?
They won 66-0 over a bad team, but still.
Miami is your only path. Right?
Got to pass the 2 SEC teams, and you got to pass Miami.
Like among the teams that were in last week, Miami is your only path in, whether you're South Carolina, Bama, or Ole Miss.
I do think there's something to say, Wes, and of course, I don't know that the committee will think this way. If Miami were 10-2 and on a 6-game winning streak, they could have the same wins and losses and same resume in a different order and might still be able to jump Carolina because of the 2 losses, only having 2 losses. I think the fact that they just lost, Carolina just won, and Carolina has put together, they're the team that's put together the winning streak against a tougher schedule with better wins, with more quality losses, quote unquote. In my book, that should have them jump Miami, but I don't know that the committee will agree with that. We'll see.
And we are still in a college football world where we've been conditioned, because the way things were for so long, what you do at the end of the year matters way more than what you do at the beginning of the year. In NFL playoffs, it's a complete numbers game. Like they try to balance out the schedules the best they can. If you have a good enough record to win your division or get in the wild card, you're either in or you're not. And it's completely based on wins and losses. But in college football, we have different schedules. We have different conferences that are not balanced. We have, different, you can look at different criteria for why a team is better, why a team is worse. And ultimately, I do think we are conditioned to think about what a team does down the stretch, because when we were trying to pick 2 teams, a lot of times it was about that. When we're trying to pick 4 teams, it was about that. I don't see that changing with now we're trying to pick 12 teams, or I guess 7 teams really, with 5 of them being, for the most part, automatic, with a couple little qualifiers in there as well. So to me, ultimately, will that 6-game winning streak have been enough? And will there be enough national media sentiment? Because you've seen a social media push, I think, on the national side, pulling for Carolina to get in because of what they've done down the stretch. Will it be enough? Who knows? We will find out Tuesday night. And we'll talk about it shortly after that. And, of course, have complete coverage on Gamecock Central. We're out of time for today, though. Y'all enjoy this win. I don't think I talked about Clint Hammond. So y'all know the drill, though. ClintHammond.com. Our show, as always, presented by our good friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Y'all make sure y'all check out that special on GamecockCentral.com, and y'all hang tight as we have complete coverage, transfer portal, signing day, playoff, all that and more on GamecockCentral.com. Appreciate y'all as always. He is Chris. I'm Wes, and we will see y'all soon.